Thanks everyone for coming to the Oxford Jurisprudence Discussion Group. This is week 9, but this is our seventh seminar of the term and the last one. We're delighted to be able to host Professor Cass Sunstein. We managed to arrange this in the last minute. He presented in the Oxford JDG a few years ago, but on the pandemic, so it was on Zoom. So we were eager to be able to have him in the flesh, and this is happening in part because he has another talk at the Center of Ethics in AI at 2 p.m. Right. So if you want to hear more Sunstein after we're done here, you can walk with him to the center with that where that talk is happening at 2. If you're registered, maybe you still have time to register for that. So that means that we're going to be wrapping up promptly at 1:35. So Professor Sunstein will be speaking for around 15 and 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. The paper is called Experiments of Living Constitutionalism. Thank you very much, Professor Sunstein, for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a complete thrill to be here. So I just did a book on habituation, by which people show diminishing sensitivity to stimuli. To be at Oxford and to be here is, for a newcomer, is a complete thrill and an amazement as well as an honor. So please don't habituate to being at Oxford. It's a thrill and an honor, whether you've been here for a day or for decades. So thanks for having me. This paper has a methodological claim and then kind of a substantive claim. And let's start with the methodological claim, shall we? Which is to choose a theory of interpretation. And this is meant to be an imperialistic claim. It's not just about American constitutional law. Um, we have to decide what makes our legal order better rather than worse. So the view is that you might have a theory of interpretation that, let's say, relies on the original public meaning of statutes, or you might have a theory of interpretation that is morally invested a la Dworkin, or you might have a theory of interpretation that pays attention to authorial intentions, or you might have a theory of interpretation that puts democracy front and center, or you might have a theory of interpretation that gives a kind of primacy to legislative or administrative institutions. And it's almost always the case that relevant legal materials don't offer an account of the theory by which they may be interpreted. So the US Constitution, forgive the parochialism, which won't surprise you given the barbaric accent you're generous enough to indulge. I actually speak with a beautiful British accent that's more natural to me, but since I teach in the US, I've developed this American accent. Does it sound real? Does it sound like actually like an American accent? I'm pretty good at it by now. The US Constitution doesn't contain the instructions for its own interpretation. This is typically the case for, it's not always the case, but it's almost always the case that no theory of interpretation is laid down in relevant documents. So the view is that we have to figure out what approach to interpretation makes our system better rather than worse, to which it's tempting to respond, who's going to do that and by what criteria, to which my response is, it's the only game in town. There's no other game to play. So to the question, who, it's us, judges, or those of us involved in thinking about the legal system. By what criteria, that's also for us to choose. And I suggest that as a matter of legal sociology, as well as a matter of normative jurisprudence, they happen to converge. The answer is we seek reflective equilibrium. And I'm drawing on Rawls's account of reflective equilibrium, not for principles of purpose of theory of justice, but for purposes of choosing a theory of legal interpretation. if, for example, the original public meaning yielded in a nation, call it Germany, uh, a set of outcomes that respected the fixed points of the person who was deciding what to do with the German Constitution, then hooray for the original public meaning, because it would be respectful of fixed points operating at multiple levels of generality. So let's say a little bit more about that. And again, I'm going to be parochial here, talk about the legal system I know best. If there's a theory of interpretation in the United States that led to the view that free speech doesn't include political dissent, or that racial segregation by the federal government is tolerable, or that religious liberty is a little thing that, let's say, is very hard on Catholics and Jews, then that theory of interpretation would stand nearly defeated for that reason. And if there's a theory of interpretation that would be respectful of the view that racial segregation is unacceptable and that free speech is robust and that the right principle of religious liberty is respectful of, let's say, at least belief, respect for the beliefs of diverse people of diverse religious convictions, then hooray for that theory of interpretation. And the debates about what theory of interpretation to adopt are actually debates among people who have different views about what theory of interpretation is consistent with that person's reflective equilibrium. So if some judges say, I believe in the theory of public meaning, the original public meaning, they owe it to explain along two dimensions. First, that this is respectful of fixed points that are extremely hard to resist at a high level of specificity, and also of fixed points with respect to things like democracy and self-government and the rule of law and human rights. And that's what people are arguing about. So that's the methodological claim. The substantive claim, I'll confess, started out as an exercise in mischief and turned into something more sincere. So the exercise in mischief was engagement with something called common good constitutionalism, which you may know about. And my beloved friend and frequent collaborator, Adrian Verbuel. And the idea of common good constitutionalism, to yours truly, has some appeal and some uh, uh, concerns associated with it. And those are things that fit with the methodological point. And so the mischievous idea is, what if we had an alternative view, drawing on Mill, which emphasizes experiments of living constitutionalism, by which we would say, for, let's say, this country or the United States or Germany or France, our foundational substantive commitment would be one that is liberal in the Millian sense, and that is, and has something to do with Raz's morality of freedom, and is very insistent on the importance of allowing different people to find their own way, both individually and in groups. And that would mean we'd be very big on religious liberty, associational freedom, on a high degree of decentralization, on sexual liberty, on privacy rights, and an assortment of institutional and rights-based uh, ideas that would allow experiments of living to flourish. And if this is looking a little dry, I really hope not, because it would allow uh, many flowers to bloom, including flowers that people would find quite ugly. So same-sex marriage, hooray for that. Religious enclaves of people who despise same-sex marriage, hooray for that also. Associations that are um, are going in directions that are extremely innovative and surprising. Hooray for that. And Mills on Liberty is our defining text here. Now, I say this was originally an exercise in mischief, but the author ended up liking experiments of living constitutionalism more than he expected to. So the proposal is that so long as experiments of living constitutionalism can fit with existing legal texts and not be a kind of adventure in revolution, and so long as the roots which it's allowing to spring up don't run afoul of other foundational ideas like no harm to others, let's say, then it's a pretty appealing way to start a new-ish account of what constitutional orders are for. You want to ask about pedigree, whether experiments of living constitutionalism has a pedigree here or in Italy or Mexico? Maybe so, maybe not. You'd want to ask, if it has a pedigree, is there an available theory of interpretation which can fit with it? And I say in the United States, absolutely. It's an idea that is not genial to the majority of the current United States Supreme Court. There's something else that's genial to it. We can talk about what that is. But I say Mill was fundamentally right in celebrating experiments of living in that very brief passage, and that a legal order that develops that foundation would be one to celebrate. Thanks.